Perfect. So I'm going to open up to the questions. So start thinking of your questions, but I'd like to just maybe ask Bongikile, I wanted to ask you, what has been, and I mean, if you had to choose one challenge that you were faced with, how did you overcome that challenge in work, personal, you can share as much as you would like, but what are the tools you drew on to move past and deal with that challenge that you were faced with in life? Please, because it was a question that came up at our school project yesterday, and I think it's such a beautiful question because people don't speak. I think it was Catherine mentioned, people don't speak about their failures, and they don't speak about what tools did they draw on to get past that. So if you could share that with us, please.
I think I'll actually share something that's personal because it did affect how I then grew up and just who I am as a person. So when I was 13, I lost my dad and lost him at an unexpected time. He had a very short illness. But what was interesting about that period was that him and I were interviewing at a private school that I had wanted to attend at the time. And I got the scholarship. It was an all-girls private school, got the full scholarship. I was going to go. But when he passed on, or when he was in hospital and then passed on, we couldn't register on time. And then I lost that scholarship. And you can imagine when you're 13, that's just heartbreaking. It's the school you've always wanted to go to. And I guess for me, I've really had an experience of both having and not having. And sometimes based on how you articulate yourself or how you present yourself, the assumption is that you come from a particular kind of family. And so being able to learn from a young age how to come from a single headed household is very difficult in South Africa. Not just from a race perspective, but also the fact that you now have to move to a different area that's very far. So access became an issue. Monetary funds were an issue. But learning from, and that's why I had shared earlier how I started doing hair from a young age. It was tapping into my strengths. What are my strengths? What do I have to my disposal that can work for me? So it didn't feel like work for me at all, but it was money that I could make and buy the things that I simply wanted to have. And I think being able to learn that resilience from a very, very young age is something I'm so thankful for right now. And I think having that sense of spirit that is not only resilient, but very confident and very strong. So I'm not afraid of spaces. I'm not afraid of people and their titles. I'm not afraid of trying new things. I'm not afraid of taking risks. And I think because I understand the kind of future I'm trying to solve for, but also the kind of future I would like to give my future family and my future kids, that then informs all the decisions that I'm now making. So being able to take a very personal situation, which you then live with forever, because it's been what? I think 15 years or so, but it doesn't go away, right? That pain doesn't leave you. The pain doesn't change. You just learn how to live with it. And I think I didn't turn out so badly.
Thank you for this opportunity. It's a deep gratitude and pleasure to actually ask this question. My first question is the YES program. May you please shed a bit more light on that? What is it about? What's the vision? And how can we join? And my second question is for the Youth Leadership Program. If they could please enlighten me on that. Thank you.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to take another question. So pass it down.
Okay, so morning. I am Rafilwe, I'm from Blue Hills College. So my question is basically, so we usually come to these forums, these conferences, we get this wave of inspiration and just kind of dilute into our everyday life. So you kind of forget about, how to really stay involved and connected. So my question is to all the amazing panelists, how do we continue to engage in all these amazing forums and conferences and organizations? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Joy Maslala from Blue Hills College. And my question goes to the youth organization. What are the 3 biggest failures? What are the 3 biggest success? What is your vision? And how did you start? Thank you.
Can I get someone from another school? Okay, excellent. From our Vice President. Could you pass the microphone down?
Good morning. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Karen and I'm from Waverly Girls High School. So my first question is, under what conditions do you apply what your mind tells you and what your heart tells you as a leader, as an individual, and the different roles that you play? And what is the difference between excitement and passion?
Never thought of that. Shall we take those, I think, just before because we don't want to forget, and then we'll just carry on. So the YES program.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Interesting fact, I grew up Seventh-day Adventist, so I've heard of Blue Hills College very well. With the YES program, it's one of the programs that we do that's directed towards teenagers. You have to be between the ages of 15 to 17, minimum of B average, and anyone is able to apply to attend the program. So a lot of our programs, some on nomination, but much like the Mandela Washington Fellowship program, you're easily able to access it. We have a website, usembassy.gov, za.usembassy.gov, and you're able to then find the different opportunities there. But to speak on the YES program, so like I said, you go for 10 months in the United States. There's 15 that are selected. You get a host family that you live with, so you literally get introduced to the full-on US culture and what does it mean to be a student or high school learner within the US. You get a host high school that you are able to then have different subjects that you take. And what I found with the kids that are on now and that have went previously is, because it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, they really want to learn on subjects that you aren't necessarily taking in your current high school. And if you're able to build a very good relationship with your principal, you can then either you finish your matric, that side, or you can come back and move on to the next grade. So I would be able to say that do stay engaged, follow the pages as well, because we're also on social media. I think it's very important to find the pages there and also then connect with alumni if you're interested. But there's also other programs outside of there that I think you'd benefit from.
So I'll just answer these 2 questions in one question. They're about the youth clubs and the failures and the successes that we've had. So the youth leadership program in the Kathrada Foundation, I think it started in the year 2010. But then speaking to the failures of that leadership program is that it didn't have a direction. So we didn't have a kind of a direction of where we want to go with these young people. So we would have all the dialogues, going to Apartheid Museum every year in June, and then doing all these kind of other things of leadership programs. And then at the end of the year, every year would go to Cape Town, Robben Island, and have fun there. But there was no direction. I think that was a failure. But then this year we came up with a different kind of a format where we're starting the youth clubs. So as Busi explained, actually we are trying to start 10 clubs by next year in the Johannesburg South, in these communities that we've chosen. And then every year after that, until the year 2029, which will be the centenary of Kathrada, we would have opened 100 youth clubs. So we have a direction this time around, and that will be actually the success of these youth clubs, because next week on Thursday, we'll be going to Cape Town with these 40 chosen young people for a training at Robben Island. So this training it's more like they are going to create a program in their own community, for their own community, where they're going to start these youth clubs. So it's not the foundation like dictating on what they should do, because these are the young people who know what are the issues they're facing in their own communities, and they are the one who needs to start this program for themselves and then to address these issues. And then obviously they'll get support from the foundation and all the materials they'll need to start this and get it running. So yeah, I think it will be the success this time around, because we have this direction and this vision, and then it's going to work, and I feel it that it's going to work. Okay.
So I know you also touched on how you could stay involved in organizations such as ours, as well as the Kathrada Foundation and the Nelson Mandela Foundation. We all have social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you're more than welcome to follow our pages. The other way in which you can engage with this museum is to leave your email address at the reception before you leave, and we'll invite you to all our programming that we do. We do lots of public programming. We address social issues, political issues, issues of race, and so forth. And then if you talk about challenges, I think a lady over there asked about challenges in your life. And I think that for me as a black woman, the challenge has always been about being confident about who you are. And because at every single turn in your life, you are knocked down by either a racist remark or by a sexist remark. And so we face that challenge, and besides everything else, we have to deal with those issues as well. And so that is a constant challenge in the life of young people as well as old people. I find that I've learned skills, and perhaps that is something you've got to learn, and the way you learn that is to stay educated. Continue your learning, read widely, and that's probably the most important thing, is to read widely. And when you are educated, you can deal with those kind of issues in an informed manner. And there's some school of thought that says, women become too emotional. And I'm saying to you, it's okay to be emotional. We are women, and we can be emotional, and we can react in an emotional way. As long as what we are talking, the point we are talking from, comes from a learned, informed point of reference, that will knock them down quite quickly. But that for me has always been a challenge in our society today. We still deal with those issues, and it's the one way that we can get past that is to have dialogues, the kind of dialogues that we have at the museum. I mean, for one of our dialogues was, is non-racist or anti-racist South Africa possible? And we have as our moderator broadcaster, world debate champion, Eusebius Makaiser, you might know him. We use him as our moderator for all our sessions. And we bring on panelists. So come and join those. The first one we'll have next year again on Human Rights Day. And we're going to speak about the effects of apartheid on the black body, which is a very important discussion. It talks about the trauma, the psychological effects, and why we act in the way we do today based on our history and so forth. So it's very important to come and join us in those discussions, ask questions, learn. So keep on top of your game, is basically what I'm saying.
I think there was a question about excitement and passion. It's a difficult question. I can say the whole idea of law excites me because I'm a lawyer and I'm excited about the law and I'm excited about the jurisprudential aspect of the law. But my passion is human rights and constitutional law. Like I have colleagues who I was with in law school who are saying, I'm a corporate attorney. I go to court to represent a bank, to attach a house for someone who is defaulting. And I don't find passion in that. even if it can pay me. But it's not something that I do. I find passion in knowing that when a judge gives a judgment at the end of the hearing, someone, for example, a poor woman who has, as you call them these days, a baby daddy who's not paying maintenance, is going to get judgment and say, his salary is going to be garnished so that this child can be supported and be maintained. So I find passion in that, at least what I'm doing has some value or some contribution to the next person. Because if I was only concentrating on the excitement, I'll be only excited about wearing gowns on every Friday, going to court and robbing the beeps, speaking this Latin, lawyers, how lawyers can be, going to court and speak this jargon language. But beyond the profession, beyond the ethics and the ethic, it's about giving services, because being a lawyer is a service. So if you are going to concentrate on the financial aspect of it, it will be only the excitement. I hope I've adequately answered you. It's a difficult question, I must say.
Do you have any comments on passion? There was something at the beginning of your question. I asked, under what conditions do you apply what your mind tells you, and under what conditions do you apply what your heart tells you? And how do you distinguish between mind and heart? Sometimes when they conflict.
It's a very, very difficult question. So I think I've always moved with an inkling from my side. I think I use more of my heart than my head. I've been accused of that. It's not necessarily being a dumb thing and so forth, because I think our work involves a lot of compassion and so forth. So it involves it's work that you can't do if you don't like. So it involves a lot of heart. I remember, just to draw from what you were saying, I remember one of the cases we did in 2000, I think it was 2009. It involved this gentleman from Burundi who had a kidney failure. So he had to be put through a dialysis and so forth, but he was rejected by the hospital in terms of getting dialysis and that treatment on the basis that the policy doesn't apply to non-South Africans. So we had to, it's not work that we did, because we're working with housing. So here's a gentleman who was literally, his face was so pale, sitting in our consulting lounge. So we had to take that case on the basis of heart, not just head, and say strictly this is what we do. So we did that case. It was just before Christmas, by the way, around the 14th, I think, of December, just before we closed for offices. But we took it to court. Ultimately, it was heard on urgent basis on the 24th of that December. While we were arguing the case in court and the guy was lying at home dying, he literally died before we got judgment. So it's a case that we could have handled better. It still haunts me. So I'm trying to draw the distinction that if I had done it by head, it would have been a tick. He died, that's it. But it's one of those cases where I still think really distinguishes between heart and head.
Can I say?
Thank you so much for sharing that story. And it reminds me of something where I had to make this decision literally in the last few weeks. And the decision was, I shared this briefly with Neil, I was asked to address a gathering. And within this gathering, 20 minutes before I was going to speak, the gathering was 5,000 people in the venue, broadcast to 75 million people live, and the one catch was that I had to address one of the presidents that was sitting in the front row by name, because I had to address every single president and I couldn't not address this one president. And I will tell you who it was. And I had to make the decision, do I step out and say, well, I no longer am going to do this keynote address? Or do I take the opportunity and have the platform to speak to millions of people who will watch, the 5,000 young people in that room? But I had to address somebody who is wanted by the International Criminal Courts, and that is President Omar al-Bashir. And so I either had to address him or remove myself from that session. And it was a massive ceremony. And it was such a difficult decision to make, because I believe that this man is wanted for the war crimes that he has committed. He has violated people in his country, and I did not want to say his name, and they said, well, if you don't say his name, we can't let you speak. So it was a really, really difficult decision to have to make. But I did decide to speak so that I could address all of the people that would have access to me speaking. And then on this last trip that I did, the other thing that was very, very hard for me was I was in Saudi Arabia, and there were a group of men there was one man who was attacking a group of women, and they were screaming and shouting back at him, and he was screaming at them. He was so rude. He put his hand in the woman's face. It was a very difficult situation, and I went to go to intervene, and somebody said to me, in our country, you'll be locked up and you'll disappear. So you can step in and say what you want, but you must know that you're in our country. And if you do that, we don't tolerate that kind of behavior. And I had to step away from something that was so vicious happening in front of me, and it was such a difficult thing to do. And this was 2 weeks after a human rights journalist was found cut up into pieces inside of a Saudi Arabian embassy. So it was a very difficult decision again to make, and to have to turn away from something that was unjust and wrong happening right in front of me. Yes.
Thank you for sharing that. It just shows how sometimes in our humanity we've got to use our head for survival. Another example which is just currently played out is Momentum. Momentum was using their head, and they were forced by public opinion to use their heart. So that's how that can play out as well. And I think the more civic activism there is around those type of issues, the more people will use their heart, which I feel is the way one should go. I don't think your heart is ever really wrong. And sometimes we do have to be sensible, but if your heart is in the right place, it's going to send you into the right direction. If you talk about passion and excitement, it's such a difficult thing. I think for me, what excites me is short-lived stuff. But what my passion is long-term. It's what I breathe. It's what I sleep on. It's what wakes me up at night. And excitement is just kancane.
So I know that there is a question over there. I haven't forgotten you, but I want to challenge you. And from the Kathrada Foundation, there's got to be a question there as well. I want to challenge you. We're going to break now for lunch. I'll explain to you exactly where it is, but you need to go up to the person that you wanted to ask your question to and take the platform and ask your question. Because often we'll break now for lunch, and it was one of the questions a little bit earlier. We have these inspiring activations, and then what happens? This is now an opportunity for you to challenge yourself and gain the courage to walk up to that person, that possible mentor, and say, this is what I want to ask, or what are your views on this, or I loved what you said about X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to challenge you guys to that. In the interest of time, I really just want to say thank you on behalf of the Miss Earth South Africa organization. Nazia, if you could just bring our other 2 bottles of wine for our YALI fellows, and just to say thank you very much for joining us here today. There is a lunch that has been prepared by Togo-san and the Apartheid Museum, so thank you for that. I'll explain to you exactly, I'll take you through to the George Bezos Hall, where they've set up an entire room for us just to have a little bit of a lunch. If I can ask Hayley from Togo-san to please join us on stage so we can do there's one final round of photos just before we do the gift. And just to say thank you very much to everybody, because everybody here has come together as stakeholders in a conversation that is needing to be had every single day. Because we know the ethos of Generation Earth is that the youth are not the leaders of tomorrow. They are the leaders of today, because you are role models today. In the schools that you come from, in the communities that you come from, you are the leaders. So it's great to say, where am I going to be in 10 years' time? What am I going to achieve in 10 years' time, 5 years' time? Because, you'll all be leaving school shortly. Where do you envision? And if you do not have a passion, if you do not have the excitement, if you do not have the vision, then where do you expect yourself to get to? You've got to make sure you're hungry for those achievements. Anyit? Awesome. I see you have a desperate question. Yes. Tell me. Is it a question for the panel? You're going to ask them at lunch. That's the challenge. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you to our partners, Togo-san, the Mandela Washington Fellowship, the Presidential Precinct, to the Kathrada Foundation for joining us, the Nelson Mandela Foundation for joining us, to our different schools, to Sanbi, Dippo, there you are, Dippo, and to the Miss Earth South Africa ambassadors, thank you for being here from all the way from Cape Town, Margot, my goodness, and Bloemfontein and Northwest. Thank you very much for being here with us. And then, of course, I'm checking if the US Embassy, thank you very much. And, of course, the Apartheid Museum for hosting us and giving us the space. And remember the power of the place. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Join us next.